What we are going to do today is we'll first hear about what net zero is to set the scene, and we're going to have a short presentation by our Oxford Net Zero Initiative speaker, Kaja Axelsson, and then after that we're going to jump into two B Corps to hear about their concrete actions on how they're tackling net zero and what their net zero journey is. My colleague will be sharing links through the chat, so all of our audience, please keep an eye on the chat to follow some useful things that we want to share with you today, and also feel free to share your actions, your business thinking around climate action with each other as well, so we can all together keep the conversation going. So before we dive into it, you see my amazing speakers today. I have three pioneering climate action leaders here with me. Before we go into the session, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge each one of them and say hi to all of you. Dear Kaja Axelsson, Carl Wheeler, and Peter Dumont, may I ask you to introduce yourselves and the organizations behind you for a short moment, and then we will get into the session. If we can maybe start with Kaja and then move to Carl and Peter.
Hi everyone, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Kaja Axelsson. I'm the Net Zero Policy Engagement Fellow at the University of Oxford. So my job is to talk to businesses and policymakers about how they can get to net zero and align with the science of climate change, try to stop global warming. So I'm very happy to be here with you today. Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Yeliz.
Very welcome.
Hi Elise, hi everyone. Thank you for having me here as well to participate in the session. My name is Carl Wheeler and I'm an ecologist by training and work for the Dutch sustainable enterprise Sapia. We produce natural detergents and cosmetic products based on natural products such as Nepalese soap shells. Sapia has been a certified B Corp since 2019, and within Sapia it's my responsibility to ensure we have positive impact in all aspects of our work, from the farmers we source from in Nepal to the social workplaces we work with in the Netherlands. Further, I'm also responsible for all of our certifications, including B Corp, WFTO, and EcoCert, and also in the lead for our commitment to the Net Zero 2030 project.
Hi, I'm Peter Dupont. I'm CEO and co-founder of the Coffee Collective in Denmark. We're a coffee roastery buying our coffee directly from coffee farmers around the world, having 6 coffee shops here in Copenhagen. I have a background as a Master's of Systems Ecology and International Development Studies. I lead our work of sustainability in Coffee Collective.
Thank you very much, everyone. To our audience, as you can see, we try to select different groups of businesses as well as a scholar to help us unpack this topic of net zero today. And we'll very soon get into the business actions, as the intention of the session today is really to focus on business and climate action together and how we can really be a positive contributor, how business can be a positive contributor of this matter. But before we get into that, Kaja, we really would love you to set the scene for us to really understand what is this new buzzword, as I was calling it, that's net zero. We every once in a while get, these interesting words that seem super important and popular, but it's really important that we really comprehend and internalize the talk so that we can put it into action. So could you take us through your mini presentation to set the scene, and I will be supporting you by screen sharing, so give me a sign to share the slides as you wish.
Okay, I'll give you a thumbs up to share. So I will just start by talking about this buzzword net zero and where it comes from. So the concept net zero, it just means a balance of emissions, sinks, and sources. So every time emissions are emitted, they have to be removed in order to achieve this balance. And the term comes from a rather kind of difficult moment in science when we realized that in order to kind of mitigate global warming, to keep our temperature goals down to a reasonable level, we weren't just going to be able to reduce the emissions that we were putting out because of industrialization, but we were going to have to actually start removing emissions, whether that's through nature-based solutions or through more technological solutions. So that's where the term net zero comes from. It requires a balance. And what people often don't realize is that, we need it. Why do we care? We need it to stop global warming. This is very important to all of us, for all of the species on the planet that we live on. But what people don't often realize is that the term net zero just means a balance. When we decide to meet it is when we stabilize the atmosphere. So when do we need to meet it is kind of a question that has been in negotiation for many years across the world. Scientists say that in order for us to kind of stop the worst effects of global warming, we need to meet net zero globally, not just, each person and their business, but globally, every single person in the world, every single emission has to be balanced by a removal by mid-century. And so that is why some of us, those most able, have to go first. And I think that brings in lots of interesting questions about historical responsibility and capability. So I'll go to the next slide to talk about why it's so important that we kind of move fast. So here's the IPCC, which is the International Panel of Climate Scientists. They've come together, and this is an interactive map that you can play with online if you go to the IPCC 1.5 report. If you move that little blue dot on the left of the screen, earlier or later, you'll see the purple go up and down. So the purple is our line of likelihood that we can actually keep warming below 1.5. Now, if you move the blue dot over to the left towards 2060, then it will become more and more difficult. The purple line will go up, showing that we're actually much more likely to meet a 2-degree warming target, which, if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about what 2 degrees would mean for our planet. It's really concerning. So the difference between half a degree of warming is the difference between extreme heat being 2.6 times worse across the globe, 37% of the global population exposed to severe heat at least once every 5 years. Think about how many people in the population die because of these heat waves already, and then 2.6 times worse. That's not a good thing. Thinking about sea level rise, 0.06 meters on average. So that means in many places it's going to be far more than that. Sea ice freeze in the Arctic, 10 times worse. The ecosystems that we care about, 1.86 times worse. So you get the point. You can go to the World Resources Institute to have a real look when you're making the case to your consumers about why you are going to net zero as fast as you can to allow others to have some more time to catch up, because we cannot allow ourselves to go over 2 degrees of warming. So the next slide shows a little bit of information as to what businesses can do to help. So the role of businesses in the race to zero. So I think a lot of people ask this question, this is the job of governments, but this is another really important graph from the WRI that shows that business climate action accelerates government action. So much of the innovation that we need to reach 1.5 to get to net zero comes out of the business sector, comes out of what you guys do. It goes down to kind of, just as we heard in the last panel, everything to engaging with your suppliers, thinking about conscious buying practices, to kind of the big scale innovation like direct air capture or CCU, which I can talk about. So important that business is in this race, because that empowers governance to feel that they can accelerate action on the policy side. And there is actually a formal race. So a lot of people ask, how do we coordinate the whole globe to meet a target? And frankly, it will be, Bill Gates just wrote a book and he said, this will be the most amazing thing that humanity has ever achieved. If we can get to net zero together, if we can achieve something completely coordinated, it will be the first time in history where everyone in the world has coordinated pretty much to get to a target. So right now, the UN Climate Change has a campaign. It's called the Race to Zero, and you can join it. And it has, this slide is already out of date because it's moving so fast. It has actually 454 cities, far more regions, over 1,000 businesses. It has investors with trillions in asset management, and it has hundreds of universities, including my own Oxford University. And you can sign up to the Race to Zero because it will help us accelerate ambition ahead of our Conference of Parties, where the nations will negotiate on key policies for getting us there. Next slide shows us the minimum criteria for joining the Race to Zero. Oh, it looks like it's having trouble loading, so I'll just talk through it. Oh, there we go. So you have to pledge at the head of your organization. It's really important that the leadership of your organization is on board with the Race to Zero, because then everything can kind of align behind it. But you also want to make a plan to involve every sector of your organization, every every department. You need to publish a roadmap that shows medium-term targets. You're not just going to get to net zero year 2029 if your goal is 2030. You have to really plan, because it's a difficult target to meet, just as I know the B Corp standards are also quite difficult in general. You guys are an ambitious group of people. And you have to take immediate action. So you have to start thinking about your spending aligning with this climate target immediately. And finally, you need to publish your target. So the goal is that you would report annually, and this helps us keep track on a global scale of where we're at. How you do this, you want to first kind of measure your scope of emissions. Then you want to think about reducing within your set of emissions. And then you want to reduce in your supply chain. So you want to think about, it might not be your direct emissions, but it might be emissions that are embodied in their products or in your supply chain. And then finally, you also need to think about scope 3. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about everything you need to think about as you're setting your target. Your scope 3 emissions are your indirect emissions, and I'll go through that in detail. But you have to think about how your customers and consumers are going forth. So this is a framework that I've just come up with, but these are the criteria that the Race to Zero have set out as kind of leadership practices. What do you need to consider when you're setting a net zero target? I like to think of it as store, because it's a good question. How are you going to capture and then store all your emissions? And the first question is scope. So you need to think about, are you covering all the greenhouse gases that are associated with your business? And the Greenhouse Gas Protocol has a good kind of map that you can use for understanding how you calculate that. You want to make sure that you're looking across your supply chain, and then I'll get into scopes in a second, 1, 2, and 3. Timing, are you going at 2030, 2040, 2050? Now, if you go 2030, you want to be reasonable about that. Like, can you reasonably do that without just offsetting everything? But that would be ideal, because a lot of B Corps are going 2030 first, and that shows true leadership. I mean, I remember at COP last year, there was a gasp because the B Corps showed up with a 2030 target altogether. And it was just the best expression of leadership. You all are really at the front edge of this work. Offsetting, you need to think about the quality of your offsets and a restriction on the amount of your offsets. So you want to make sure that kind of the projects that you're investing in to offset any emissions are quality. They have addition. You want to make sure that they're not double counted. You want to make sure they're verifiable. So whoever you're talking to can say, yes, in fact, we did do this restoration project. And you want to think first about the principle of as low as reasonably possible reducing before relying on offsets. It's actually probably, if you're investing in decent offsets, it's probably going to be cheaper for you to just think about efficiency and emissions reductions first, or maybe to offset until you get to that point. But by your net zero target, you might use very little offsetting. That would be ideal. Reporting and governance is the next piece. Of course, you want to report annually, as I said, but you also want to arrange your whole kind of organization around making sure that this target is achievable. And you want to consider equity. So there's, I think, 3 stakeholder groups that I like to think about when considering equity in your net zero target. And I know the B Corps have lots of ways of considering stakeholders, so you may think about this differently. But I think about, climate refugees. Is your target soon enough to kind of prevent people from having to leave their homes because of the kind of timing, that the pace that globally we're going at to reduce global warming? You want to think about the poorest in the world. It may be difficult for some people in the world to meet a net zero target now, so maybe you go first to give them a little more time. And then, of course, you need to think about your own workers. How is your plan going to affect your workers? How can you make sure that there's a just transition if you're currently involving a system that's heavy emitting and you're transitioning away from that? How can you scale up your workers to come with you? And just the last 2 slides, Yellis wanted me to go over scope, because this is just a really important piece of your kind of measuring and reporting of emissions. So people talk about it a lot. We think that a good leadership practice is to make sure you've covered all 3 scopes. So the first one is a bit obvious. It's just the fuel you use, your air conditioning, your business car travel. So kind of the emissions that are directly associated with the core of your business. And then scope 2 is electricity purchase. So these are the emissions that are not necessarily being burned on your site, but say, you've got a building and it runs on natural gas or electricity, and that power plant is elsewhere. Well, there is actually a lot of opportunities to calculate those emissions. You can plug it into a lot of simple calculators by just looking at your energy bill. And then scope 3 is where I think that people have a lot of problems, but actually there's a lot of studies that show that most of emissions are what we would call scope 3 emissions, kind of indirect and consumer emissions. So That's your company's employees driving back and forth to work. That's the kind of business travel that is not directly associated. It's not maybe what you would put in to your accounting system. It's not maybe your CEO traveling somewhere, but it is business travel that might be associated with your business, where your business benefits from that travel. It's also the emissions associated with your product. So if you're a car company and you've got people driving around in cars and they're, burning fuel as a result of it, that might go into the scope 3. There's a lot of discussions over how we kind of share responsibility for scope 3 emissions. But if you can include it and you can keep that in your net zero target, we really encourage you to, because that's thorough accounting, and then that will get us there to the goal faster. And then practically, there's a lot of tools that can help you. So my last slide is just a demonstration of an offering that the B Corp Climate Collective have worked with us. And it's just I think I didn't include it, but if you just go to, there should be a link in the chat of a tool library that can help you build your net zero target. We've got all the best publicly free available tools to help measure, reduce, and offset your emissions. And I hope that they're really helpful for you. So thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much. I think Mark is going to be sharing the new tools library addition to B Corp Climate Collective website, which we are thoroughly proud about. As you pointed out, the task is very big that's asked from anyone in the world but B Corp leaders really took the challenge on by committing to net zero journey by 2030. And that's really a collective learning journey, right? I want to point out also, since you mentioned Race to Zero campaign, I wanted to make the link to, how we've been also part of this global Race to Zero campaign as a B Corp movement, which, as you see the individuals in this picture, B Corp leaders, more than 500 of them, took the stage in 2019 at the UN Climate Change Conference at COP25 and declared this pioneering attitude. And where we are at now is that we're more than 800 B Corps globally, and we are organizing ourselves as B Corp Climate Collective, which really goes into this task of understanding where do we experiment, where do we innovate, and where do we need to learn from each other. I have today two speakers with me from two B Corps, Sapio and Coffee Collective, to share their journey so far. We are in 2021. We have 9 years to go. It might look a lot. It's not that much. We know Kaya already shared with us the urgency of the situation. But I really want to be able to now, Peter and Carl, to get your experiences to be inspiration to everyone else to really start taking the steps as well. So maybe to start with first, Peter, may I ask you, can you tell us briefly when and how did Coffee Club Collective started its net zero journey?
Well, we started as a company in 2007, but in 2013 we got to see a life cycle analysis of the CO2 emissions behind a cup of coffee. And that surprised us because actually 40% of the total emissions behind a cup of coffee, if you go all the way back from the coffee being a seed and until the cup, 40% of those emissions are right in our business. It's when we brew the coffee or when you brew the coffee at home. So that was like an eye-opener to us, which also is interesting, I think, in the way that when we think of we wanting to do something better for the environment, and we are in a coffee business, you might think we need to go to tell the producers how do they grow in a better way, protecting the environment. But actually, if we start right with what we do, we can cut 40% of the emissions behind a cup of coffee. So what we did was we looked into where does these emissions come from. It's mainly from the brewing. It's mainly from the heating of water for brewing coffee. And for that, we use electricity. So in 2013, we started buying shares in windmills to be able to produce the same amount of electricity that we use for brewing coffee. And we switched our electricity supplier to one who could guarantee that it's all supply from windmills. So that was the start. Then along the way, we've done smaller steps, like we have some business travel, air travel that we're compensating and so on. But the big next step was 2019 when we become B Corp certified. And when we joined Net Zero Goal, and we actually set it a little bit tighter for ourselves because we think this is really urgent. So we pledged to be net zero next year, 22.
Awesome. Peter, we will hear more about it because I want to get into, how you are planning to reduce more, how you're using offsets for the current moment. But I want to also ask Carl a similar question to start with that. Carl, can you share with us why is this important for Sapia? Why is it, as a business, you value, as a business value or non-business value, want to work on your net zero journey?
Yeah, so thank you. So we've always been, from the start, really been aware that we have a carbon footprint. And basically, when we heard about the Net Zero 2030 in the Be Inspired event, I think in 2019 in London it was, we saw this actually as a real opportunity to stand up and kind of walk the talk we've been doing. And thus being a social and sustainable enterprise, it's also ingrained in our company DNA to, we like to call it, to wash the world a cleaner and brighter place. And it just seemed the obvious next step for us to get involved in this. Yeah, I also really believe in what Kaya said. It's in getting to net zero. It's important, first of all, to know where your emissions are and then reducing as much as you can before offsetting. And that would be a final step for us to obviously to get to the net zero. And I think another thing we're always looking to improve and grow as a small company within such a strange market we're in. We're in the laundry detergent market. And we're surrounded by multinationals. And I think also in achieving net zero, and also because we have to all take these steps, but it's also a good way of being open and breaking open the taboo in our sector.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carl. Well, I want to also give a little disclaimer here at this point. Actually, I'm a resident of Amsterdam. I've been using Sapia detergents already several years. So I want to also praise your work here. And I'm sure in Turkey there are similar products. So audience, please go find those companies in Turkey as well. And Carl, to get into, the tricky details of, how you've been thinking and road mapping for your net zero so far, can you give us a bit more of a guidance around what strategies you put into place for reduction, for, how did you so far thought about your process? And I think really to, point out to every one of us and to our audience is that we're work in progress, and let's embrace it and let's talk about the dirty process now. And I invite everyone to be comfortable with that so that we can really continue this journey towards that end goal that we're aiming. So let's keep that in mind and see, we're 9 years into 2030. Where are we at now?
Yeah, so I think the key thing is, as for how to get to net zero, is to make it achievable, is to break it down into small steps. There is no way, there's no one who can just take a project and go, net zero, we're going to solve it just like this. There are so many small steps, at least in our supply chain, for instance, that we have to just break up and say, okay, this is certain aspect of our supply chain. So first of all, what we've done this year, we've embedded it into our company goals to identify and measure the CO2 emissions we have in the various scopes. That's the first step for us. Another one is we've partnered up now with a program that's called the Good Shipping Program, because we know, for instance, that transport is a painful transport from Nepal to the Netherlands is a painful CO2. And they, for instance, they use second generation biofuels as a fuel switch with the oil that's normally used in transports. So it's a bit of a combination for me with setting the big goals, making them smaller, and also just getting done what you can and going to do what you identify. Okay, this is a painful, this is causing a lot of emissions. How can we set this first? How can we reduce this first? And that, for instance, is an example of our reduction and not necessarily offsetting. So as Kaya said as well, reduction is very important. Another thing we've done over the past year is it's very hard, as Kaya said, to identify all Scope 3 emissions. But we started with, how can we just get the CO2 equivalent of our packaging, just as a basic, because our packaging is made out of recycled plastic and cardboard. This information is readily available. How much CO2 equivalent do you have in just your packaging of your product? Step one. This is another example of just cutting it down into small steps. You can try and look at the whole product as a whole, but that involves so many steps. We've got ingredients coming from all over Europe in the first place. But just by cutting it down, packaging, then ingredients, then production. These are 3 steps which make it easier to work on and give yourself the time as well, because we know 9 years it seems a long time, but it does go by quickly. We're already over 1.5 years from when we heard of and signed the commitment. And it's not an easy step, but I think it's definitely a challenge for everyone. And I really would say go for it and make it doable for yourself.
I really praise everyone working in being a business, having the task of already being a business and doing your business. And on top of that, taking the responsibility of, finding these ways where in my supply chain am I supposed to reduce. It's really, I want to praise you for doing this work, you and many other B Corps, Carl. And I want to move to Peter also to ask to get into this reduction part of Coffee Collective, which, as we heard from Kaya, is really the hard part, but it's the most crucial part really in the global net zero journey. And Peter, you did a study together with the University of Copenhagen a couple of years ago, which I think helped you to measure and then get into some reduction strategies. Can you share with us so far, what have you strategized and what have you implemented for reduction?
Yeah, that's kind of a baseline study that we worked together with the University of Copenhagen with. That was a really good starting point for us to see where are our major emissions. And that was actually pointed clearly to 3 different parts. One is from coffee suppliers, another from the rest of our suppliers, and then a big part from our waste generation. And so we have built up 3 different strategies to each of 3 major emission parts, and starting very much with the waste, because that's very much in our hands. What can we do to lower the waste we are creating? Looking at our own internal packaging, is there something we can change for more recyclable, reusable packaging? And what can we do to sort our waste that goes out of the company better and bring that to recycling? So that's something we've been working a lot on in the time since we made the pledge and got the baseline study. But then also with the suppliers, we have 2 different kinds of suppliers. We have the coffee suppliers, which we very much see as our partners. We cooperate a lot with them. We visit them every year, and they are in another end of the world than we are. And then we have other suppliers who might be from the Netherlands or somewhere else in EU. And for the other suppliers, we put it in as a hard criteria. What are the carbon emissions behind your product? Put that in against, together with price and quality of the product, and choose our suppliers from that. The coffee suppliers we work with differently. We have several different types of coffee suppliers. Some have a lot of resources. Actually, we have 2 good partners that actually have done a lot of work for themselves in trying to reduce their emissions and who are growing their own forest and so on. And then we have others where we approach them more softly and gently and just try to share knowledge on what you can do as a coffee farmer.
Beautiful. Thank you, Peter. When we had our preparation session, of course, when we discussed, I really appreciated your approach to your suppliers and how you're seeing them as partners. And at the same time, you involve other suppliers onboarded on this net zero journey and creating influence through your partnership in your supply chain as well. And I know there's so much more to share, and I want to give hints to our audience, and we unfortunately have limited time, so we want to give taste of the things that you're doing. And I actually want to move from there to this controversial topic of offsetting. I mean, Kaya shared a lot already about it, and it easily gets controversial when we talk about offsetting and whether it's truthfully helping us to achieve the massive task or not. And, I also want to point out here is that the University of Oxford, which Kaya is a part of, launched a guidebook for offsetting just recently. My colleague will be sharing it in the chat, so please feel free to check it out, as it's a thorough guidebook for anyone to learn more about offsetting, including potentially our speakers. We really greatly benefit from scholars' work, right, in this field, as it's all developing, it's all becoming clearer for us, the right strategies. And whether we call it offsetting or we want to rather call it, contributions to reach global emission reduction targets, which another B Corp from France, Carbon 4, would love to say that instead of calling it offsetting. Whether we call it or, contributions, I want to ask you, Peter, you do also thought about, different ways of using offsetting in a meaningful way as you have your net zero journey so far. Can you give us also some information about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have pledged to be net zero next year. And of course, a big part of that is offsetting. But it's important for me to stress that I'll reach that goal of being net zero next year by offsetting doesn't mean that we'll not continue to work on reducing our emissions. It's just being balanced next year. And then, of course, as Kaya mentioned, actually, I believe there's a lot of things where it's cheaper to reduce emissions than buy the offset. So I think that's just important for me to start with, that reaching net zero is not the end of the journey. It's just a balance point, and then we need to continue to work on reducing our emissions. But what we do for reducing emissions, we look at this scope 1, 2, 3 also a structure that Kaya talks about. We say scope 1 and 2 is what we have direct impact on. Also, a part of scope 3 is more or less under our own influence. For instance, the waste generation, we think we have quite a big influence on how good are we at recycling. So this we see as our business actions. So this part we want to find offsetting mechanism that is also integrated in our business. For the rest of the part, which is more related to our suppliers and so on, we'll just look at gold standard certified offsetting mechanism, or whoever is like, we have a PhD in this that is helping us choosing the right offsetting mechanisms. But for the core of our business, our plan is that we are working on and developing is to do a reforestation project here in Denmark, not in somewhere else in the world where we could buy it cheaper, but do it here in Denmark, because then we believe we can integrate it in our company in a different way. We can take, my hope is that we can bring days, I would love myself, have days a year where I can go out, assist that forest in growing physically, cut some weeds, dig some dirt, or whatever I can do out in nature. And that's the hope for us, that we can take our employees also a few days a year out of their normal routines, go out in nature and get all the values that gives. And also let it to be somehow a recreational space that you can also go as an employee to just take some de-stressing time off, bicycling, running around the forest or whatever is your plan. And that is really a long-term project. And we have a lot of plans also for how that should be like a nature-like management of the forest and so on. But I guess that's for another time to dive into.
Yeah, I really look forward to one day every business, owning as part of their business a nature wilderness zone and using it as either as a food forest or as a complete wilderness zone. And, your employee engagement within that journey is also truly inspiring. And I want to get back to that employee engagement part actually, but I will move to Carl for a moment to ask about, Carl, when we talked to you and I had the preparation talk, it was, to me, quite impressive that you actually had such a grounded and positive attitude towards, taking this challenge on. So, and that's needed because we need to stay in this journey for a long time. And I want to ask you, what challenges do you face and what recommendations do you have for any other business who is taking a similar journey?
Well, I'm glad to hear you hear my enthusiasm for it, because I am really enthusiastic about it and I think it has to be done. I think that would probably even be the first thing. You have to have someone on board who is willing to put time in it, who's willing to do the hard work. It's not always easy. So I think for a small company such as us, the main challenges are time and resources. We're all on limited time, and a project like this can have a big impact on a smaller company. And as also well with resources, if you don't do it yourself, you're going to have to outsource it, and outsources is obviously a costly thing to do. And another challenge, which I think is what we face as a company that produces a product, is that our producers aren't always where we want them to be. As being a leader, we're also involved with a lot of more traditional production facilities, for instance. They're not thinking about their CO2 emissions. So for me, this is a kind of thing. Okay, you got to be. So challenges. Okay, you've got them, but then you got to try and think about them creatively. So, okay, if my producer has no idea what CO2 he is emitting, we can look at it a different way. So how much energy, what is their energy cost? What are they looking at their production costs? And you can say, okay, instead of purchasing fossil fuel energy, what would be the extra cost to go for the greener energy solutions? Possibly even 100% renewable, but one step at a time. And I think that's again with what I said previously. Start small, begin with what you know, and take it one step at a time, because you're not going to oversee it if you take it as one big project. You've got to cut it down into smaller parts. And so my advice for companies that produce product, like also Coffee Collective has a product that is produced and consumed, map out your supply chain is a very important place to start, because if you don't know where it's coming from, you're not going to be able to know what your footprint is. And then after you've done that, break the challenges up into, as said previously, the smaller overseeable steps.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Carl. We need creative and positive thinking throughout this process. Peter, actually my last question to you, Peter, when you and I had again the preparation talk, I was also very impressed how, grounded and educated your understanding of this topic was. And, you have a PhD available within your team who's working, and you've been engaging your employees to come up with business solutions. And that's really inspiring. inspiring, I think, for other businesses to see where the resources and knowledge can be, to think in a different way. Can you maybe share some, words of wisdom with us that where you find inspiration to innovate, experiment, and keep improving?
Well, I think, of course, being part of the B Corp movement, one of the things is to get access to learning from other like-minded businesses. But internally, we did this thing that has been like a main source of improvement. A few years ago, we created an internal green group. So invited employees from different parts of our organization who either have some background with sustainability or have a strong passion for doing something about sustainability. And there are a lot of people who have these days, so it's a huge source of inspiration. We did a green group where we invited people to join who wanted to be part of our sustainability group, our sustainability work. And we invite every year, we rebuild that, look at what issues do we have at hand, send invitations out to the employees. And the interested people, they contact us, and then we set a relevant group that can work on next year's sustainability challenges. And that is like something I can recommend. It's a huge source for us for improvement.
Amazing, Peter. I think participatory design and inclusion is really the next frontier in finding all of these solutions, and that's really what the B Corp Climate Collective is yearning to be. And that's a whole another subject, and we will hopefully get into it in another session. But for this one, we're coming to the very close to an end. And I want to actually ask Kaya one more question. As speaking of participation and inclusion, she's been influential in bringing youth voice into this area as well. And Kaya, I know that we wish to have a whole hour to talk about this subject, and it deserves that. But luckily, there's going to be a third day on 21st of March of Images Summit, which will create space for youth action as well. But from your experience and your work with youth, can you share with us what's their voice in climate action?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, first I just wanted to agree with Peter and Carl and say that there's research to back this up, that young people who are entering the job market overwhelmingly will say that they will take a pay cut if their company that they work for, if they feel that they can be involved in kind of social and environmental good and improving the company that they work for on those metrics. So I think young people are continuing to be a driving force. And if we want to attract the best talent, companies have to be making the pathway to net zero possible. The work that I have done with young people is also about kind of training people on how to have this conversation. Young people are coming out of college with the most fresh information on climate science, on sustainability, on the environment. Back when my parents were in college, that they were very clued up about climate change for their time, but the research has just moved on so much. So I think within your company, considering young people as an asset in terms of environmental sustainability and I think social sustainability as well. And I also just think that there's such an intergenerational justice perspective that we bring into this work around, the way that we offset, it has a storage limit. So if we're relying entirely on nature-based solutions, and just like our panelists have said, they don't consider their work done once they have invested in some great nature projects, because there's a limited time frame, especially with shifting climate, land use management, and politics in areas. There's a limited storage to how long a lot of our offsets can actually hold the removed carbon. And so we need to be thinking for our future generations, what if that storage dries up? Then they have to deal again with the emissions that we have been putting out today. And so that's why young people's voices are so important in all of this, because we're handing them the work that we do today to either deal with future problems or deal with the problems that will be already present because of the adaptation challenges of climate change already.
Thank you so much, Kaya, for holding that front and bringing that wisdom to us in this channel as well. And it's been truly inspiring seeing youth activism in the past years, right? It's a whole another new outcoming that none of us really anticipated, and truly inspired. And I think the inclusion, participation, I look forward to more of that, when what Image is doing in this 2 days is truly an example of that as well. I really want to thank you all, Kaya, we already put the library in the chat, but my colleague, please leave it again, because that was a fabulous tools library we were able to develop together with Oxford Net Zero, and we're truly proud of it because that gives open source access to any single company in the world to start putting in use right now. And Peter, Carl, thank you so much for showing up and sharing your journey as you are finding the answers really yourselves. Thank you heartfully for doing that. And of course, the Imager Summit goes on. It's going to continue. We're going to continue learning and unlearning together in these 2 days. And as B-Lab Europe, we're super excited to be part of this summit. And for now, I will say bye, but we'll catch soon. Görüşmek üzere. Güle güle.